Welcome, everybody. We're going to be working now on this app build called the personality quiz. We've kind of gone through the introductory pages on this where they kind of show you what this is going to be. As a really quick overview, I'm going to go back one page. So I'm on page 537 in the student version of the book. And they have this screenshot here. So basically what we're going to build is we're going to build a personality quiz that's going to combine a bunch of different skills. We're going to be looking at a multi-screen app. So there's going to be 3 different views or storyboards that we're working with that are linked together. There's going to be a navigation workflow that goes through. So we'll have segues between one screen to the next and how they transition. We'll have a bunch of interactivity. We'll work with some new data structures, one called an enum, where we have specific answers relative to certain structures already built. And then, basically the intro screen would come up. This person would click this. They would go to a series of questions with a progress bar through the questions. And then there'll be a results screen, which displays the outcome of the app. So that's kind of the general lay of the land. If you want to read more in depth about the build up to it, you can go to the previous pages here and just read through. I'm going to focus on just the app build. This is our last day of class. So we're going to get as far as we can. I don't know if we'll complete the whole thing, but maybe we will. All right. So here we are. I do have Xcode up and running right now. So I have my intro splash screen here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new Xcode project. We are going to use the iOS template as we have for the majority of the course, and we're going to be asked to name it personality quiz. So I'm going to type that in. You guys should do the same. Try to spell it correctly if you can. We'll stick with the storyboard. The language is Swift. We're not going to do core data or include tests. We'll click next, and then we'll just find a place to store it. I've been doing that here in my Swift 2 Spring 2024 folder where I know where to find it. And I'm just going to go ahead and click create. That will, of course, build out this intro screen. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. And we have kind of the initial part of it at least complete. And if you want, you can go to, the main storyboard if you want to load that up on the screen. And then we'll notice here one of the instructions says the storyboard already contains one view controller, but you'll need to drag 2 more from the object library onto the canvas and position all of them in a horizontal row. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to move the book off screen here and go to the other screen with it to read the instructions. And then we're going to try to follow the instructions here. I might pull it back over from time to time if we need, but hopefully not. All right. So we haven't done this action before. So this should be kind of, I think, helpful in terms of doing something new. I'm going to go ahead and come up to the object library here. And I'm going to type view. Spell it correctly, though. It's VIE. And there's a view controller. All right. So once I've found it here, I'm going to drag a couple more onto the screen. And I want to kind of align them horizontally on purpose. Yeah, I could use the sidebar there and just replicate them, but dragging them out like this is fine too. All right. So there we are with all 3 of them on the screen. And you can, if you want to tidy them up a little bit, feel free. You can get really kind of picky about this stuff if you want. It really truly doesn't matter how organized you are with it because the outcome of the app will work either way. Right. All right. So now you can see here, in the sidebar, right, that we have, that each one of them has all the same components embedded within them, right? They're carbon copies of each other, basically. Now these 3 view controllers are going to hold the pieces that we're building, as we go. So it says the first view controller will invite the player to take your quiz. And it says at a minimum, it needs to include a label that introduces the quiz and a button to begin. Beyond these simple requirements, the design of the screen is really entirely up to you. But you'll notice that they have you know, a big label, a button, and then, you know, little animals in the corner, you know, so if you guys are, this is kind of what we're shooting for. So let's try to do this. Let's drag a label onto the first one. Let's drag a button onto the first one, and then see if we can put our little emojis on there as well. All right, so that's kind of the process. So let's go ahead. We'll go to the we'll click into that first view controller. So this is the active one. You notice when I click on it, it highlights in the sidebar. The toolbar also changes here. All right, and then I'm going to click that object library. We'll do a label. Just kind of put it right in the center there somewhere. And then we'll go ahead and add a button. We'll put that in the center too. Let's go ahead and start tweaking these. And I don't know if they give us very specific settings to use. All right, so they do. If you move on to page 540, they add a label from the object library, add a button just below. We just did that. Then use the attributes inspector and set the alignment for the label to centered. So it is highlighted right now. So I'm going to set the alignment to centered. Now change the label's text color and font. And in this screenshot, it reads, "Which animal are you?" And they're suggesting Georgia font regular 30. Okay, so let's change the text to start with. So if we're just doing what they have here, which animal are you? The font. I don't know if we can just type in Georgia or if it's not picking it up, but for me, it's not really finding it. Well, I can go up to 30 easily enough. Oh, there it is. It's like right in front of my face, but I'm just not reading it. Georgia font regular 30. Okay, that's good. So now it looks like theirs. Select the button and then update it to read begin personality quiz. And using the system font at 15.0. And I'm just typing that in manually. Oh, but I lost my text, so I got to type that in again. And then I'm just hitting tab to lock it in. I don't know if that one needs to be aligned to center, but you certainly could. I don't think it's a huge deal. All right, so now I'm kind of moving on to the next set of instructions here. So I'm moving on to page 542 in the book. And I'm using the xcode 13 version of the book for anybody that's watching the video and is wondering. And it says, whenever you have multiple items in a horizontal row or vertical column, it's a good idea to use a stack view. This approach will reduce the number of constraints you'll need to create and manage. So it says, highlight the label and the button and click the embed in button and select the stack view. Okay, so, all right, so I'm not reading that very well, but I'm going to go ahead and highlight both of these. And it might be easier. And sometimes I don't know if you guys are finding this, but sometimes it's easier to highlight it here, or you can command click and select them both. Then you can come down here to that last button and you can embed in stack view. You just do that. And then really what we're doing and this correlates to a lot of other like graphical programming concepts. This is where we're using encapsulation to collectively control a bunch of elements. And it helps a lot with layout. And it says here, with the stack still selected in the attributes inspector, to check that the axis is set to vertical. And there it is, vertical. And then set both the alignment and distribution to fill. So the alignment to fill and distribution to fill. And it says these settings ensure that the elements in the stack are positioned vertically and that they'll fill all available space along the stack view's axis. The label and the button should be centered both horizontally and vertically, although you can create two constraints to do that. The label is too close to the screen's horizontal bounds to use leading and trailing constraints that it doesn't run off the screen. So use the add constraint tool to add leading and trailing constraints, 8 points each from each side. Okay, so we're going to use the add constraints tool. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm looking at their image of this to make sure that I'm doing it correctly. I'm not seeing that mine is like centered really well, but we'll work around that. So right now mine's at a different top position. They're starting at 339. But they might be using a different phone template too. But the left and the right ones, these should be set to 8 and 8. And then the bottom one is to whatever it is, and it's constrained to the margins. And then we're going to add those two constraints. All right. And you're adding just the two constraints, by the way, because those are where the red I-beams are highlighted there. So I'm going to add them. And now you can see it centered itself, right? That's good.
Yep.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're moving on to page 544 now. Next, use the align tool to add a constraint that centers the stack view vertically. Right, so we're going to go back to the same thing. And yeah, that is not the one. That's not the align tool, apparently. There's the align tool. And so we're going to vertically in the container, we're going to align it. I'm reading their instructions again because it feels a little unclear to me. So they're only checking the one. All right. And they're adding 0 here. And for whatever reason, I'm not sure which of these two I should be. Use a standard value. Yeah, it's not letting me do it. I think that's pretty fascinating. I guess I'm not super concerned about it, right? But I'm wondering as to why. So let me, maybe it's because of what I have selected here, right? So I'm going to choose the stack view here in the side panel and then try that again. Okay, so there we go. All right, so that was the trick there. So highlighted here on the side, because what was happening is I was just on the label. All right, so now that you have stack view highlighted, click the alignment tool, add one constraint. All right, let's keep pressing forward here. All right, and now it says that's all that's necessary for an introduction screen, but it's a little boring. All right, what are the possible outcomes for this topic? It would be fun to add an emoji for each animal: dog, cat, rabbit, and turtle. Position them in the 4 corners of the screen. If there aren't any emoji that fit your particular topic, consider using images in place of emoji text, right? So we're just going to use the emoji text because the library is there, right? And we don't have to go hunting down images, but you could make it like, whatever you want it to be. If you haven't already, drag 4 more labels from the object library onto the view, replace the text with the emoji for each animal. All right, so let's do that. Let's just do the 4 label things. And you're going to roughly want to put them in those corners. So here's 1, to, and then I'm letting the guides help me, by the way, get them roughly into the right spot. Of course, we can control these with constraints. All right, so to change the text in each label, and you come up here to the label thing, right? And so I want you to remember this trick. If you want to bring up the emoji panel, right? I think it's okay. So right here, they're saying to bring up the emoji picker, highlight the label text in the attributes inspector, like I have up here, right? And then press Control Command Space. So Control Command Space, and there's my emoji panel. And then you'll notice that I already have most of those animals there because I probably have already done it. And what you can do is very simply, like if you want to find a dog, find a dog that appeals to you. I think they use this one. And I'll leave it up to you, whichever one you want to pick. I think I'm going to go with this one because it kind of looks like my dog. All right. And I know that's kind of a silly reason to do it. And then here for the system font, I'm going to bring it up to 40. And I'm going to hit tab and it should appear, right? And so I think we have to do a dog, a cat, a rabbit, and a turtle, I think is what the animals are. So just do that with each one of those labels. So highlight the text, Control Command Space, type in the thing you want to try to find. I'm going to use different icons than they're using, and that's actually quite all right. And then I'm going to just manually type the 40 in this time. All right. You want to make them bigger? Hey, go for it. No harm done. Now we'll do a rabbit. Spell it right, though. Isn't that interesting? It brings up all the Arabic characters. Right? And I like the versions of these that I'm choosing better than the ones that they've chosen in the book. So and then finally a turtle. Only turtle we have. So now the next little piece here. So once you have these added, basically they're saying just keep it within the margins in the safe zone, which I think we've kind of accomplished already. But it says to hold your emoji in the respective corners on all screens, you need to add 2 constraints to each label. Begin by selecting the top left label and clicking Add New Constraints. So we'll start with the dog, basically. And then down here, Add New Constraints. And then enable the top and leading constraints. So that would be these 2, right? And if you use layout guides, the top constraint should have a value of 0. So apparently it didn't. And the leading constraint should have a value of 20. So in other words, 0 here and 20 here. All right, so we'll add those 2 constraints. You see how they kind of moved it a little bit. Position your top left. So that one's all set. And it says now repeat the steps for the other 3, but setting the constraints to the appropriate edges. So we're, so in other words, the cat, oops. All right, that was not good. Where did my stuff go? There it is. All right. That was fun. All right, so I'm going to click on the cat, add the constraints. We'll do 0 on the top and 20 on the right. And then add the constraints. With the rabbit, we'll go 0 on the bottom and 20 on the left. I'm not sure I like that. All right. So they have a diagram here, and I'm going to pull the diagram up. This is what they did, right? So the dog and the cat, I think we got right. The turtle, oh, I mean, and the turtle and the rabbit, I mean, that's basically what I went for, but I'm not really sure that I like where it's landing
I
personally.
think you have to click and drag them to their guide points on the screen.
You're saying I should undo what I did?
Yeah.
So I think okay, I see your point, right? So that puts it in I guess the zone of safety, right?
Yeah.
So this one's okay, but this one should be 20. Okay, much better. Thank you, Jonathan.
You're welcome.
All right. 20 on that one. We'll lock it in. 0 on the bottom one. And you see if the numbers are right, I just click the little I bars to make it happen. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. It says Xcode isn't satisfied with only these constraints. It produces a warning notifying you that the trailing and leading constraints are missing, which may cause overlapping with other views. The reason is that labels often have dynamic values or sizes. For this interface design, you're fine leaving it as is. However, it's best practice to satisfy the compile and resolve all warnings. So what they're telling us is that we're going to have some sort of warnings here about it, but that we can ignore, right? So, all right. I don't know how helpful that is, but it is what it is. So it says the dog and the rabbit need trailing constraints where the cat and the turtle need leading constraints. So you can use several options to meet the requirements of your interface design. The quickest is to add a horizontal space between the dog and the cat, as well as the rabbit and the turtle, and set the constraints to 0 so they remain in place no matter what the screen size is. So the way that you do this is you control drag from the dog to the cat and select horizontal spacing. So I'm going to try this. So I'm going to control drag from the dog to the cat and then horizontal spacing. You guys saw how I did that? I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then I'm assuming the maneuver is the same. Okay, so it says with a constraint added, navigate to the size inspector and locate the trailing space constraint. And that would be,
That's the triangle.
yeah. So we're looking for this one. And it says click edit. And set the constraint to be greater than or equal to 0. So I'm locking that in. And now you can see it appear, right? You see how it puts that little symbol in there? Now we're going to repeat this for the turtle and the rabbit. So once again, control drag, horizontal spacing, and then same setting. And we're doing greater than or equal to 0. Tabbing out of there to lock it in. And now we have both of those set. Little warning it gives me here. It says along the way, after positioning and adding constraints, you might notice some yellow warning. That's okay. Click the update frames button near the bottom of the interface builder to readjust the position and size of your views to match the constraints you've created. Now I'm not seeing that warning. Are you guys seeing that warning?
No, just the
Is it-
initial
is it-
two.
Yeah, I'm just seeing just the 2. It says view controller is unreachable because it has no entry points and no identifier, but I'm guessing that is for our 2 additional view controllers we put in.
Yeah, and
So-
you know, this is kind of interesting because these are just graphics on the screen. And like they mentioned, you know, we're kind of using labels in kind of a weird way here. So see if I can, you might notice some yellow warnings. That's okay. Click the update frames button near the bottom of the interface, right? Which is this button down here. But I'm not seeing that. Maybe I need to, you know, it's not allowing me to click it, but this is the button they want us to use, right? I don't know if we have to highlight maybe the animals. I'm just select both. No, I'm not getting the option here. Are you guys getting the option to click that button?
Maybe if you highlight and click the view controller scene at the top there where it has that red mark. Yeah, that's weird.
I mean, I'm not getting it.
You're not getting it at all, Jomar?
No. No.
Okay. Well, you must be special. Right. I don't think this is really a big deal. I don't know if that would like break anything, honestly. So, I mean, this is kind of like, I think one of them, right? So I'm going to read that instruction one more time. Along the way, positioning, adding constraint might have some yellow warnings. That's okay. Yeah, and you know what? I'm not
think-
saying that it's a problem.
I
None.
think it. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think what it's trying to say is if you do have an issue or if a problem doesn't pop up, to just update the little frameworks on the bottom corner.
Okay.
That's how I'm understanding it.
Yeah, and I think you're probably right. I'm just you know, when they give an instruction, I kind of feel like we should probably have a way to deal with it. Yeah, so you know, I guess I'm not too worried about it because this is, you know, there's not really a lot going on here. You know, that's going to cause a problem. If it does, well, we'll figure it out when we get there. So for right now, let's just kind of roll with it. And you see, I'm kind of clicking on all these like different aspects to see if I can update the frames. And there is no, at least graphically, no option there. All right, we'll just leave it and move forward. All right, I think, you know what, we're reaching a point where we should probably take a break. It's 2:15. So let's break for about 5-10 minutes. Let's come back at 2:25.
Okay.
All right, and I'm going to
Okay.
pause the recording. All right, we're back from our break and we're going to carry on. We're on the bottom of page 548 in the Swift Fundamentals Xcode 13 book. And it says here, create the question and answer screen. And it says the second view controller will display each question one at a time, along with input controls that allow the player to respond. The controls you use, buttons, switches, or sliders, need to make sense for the questions and answers in your quiz. So they're going to provide ones that we can follow with, and that's what I suggest, but you can always tweak them and make them something else. Or if you think of something clever to add, you can, you know, make it your own way. And it says you'll think through the controls a little bit later in the project. And it says basically after the player has answered a question, your app will need to make a decision. If there's another question in the quiz, update the labels and controls in the view accordingly. If there are no more questions in the new, if there are no more questions, display the results in the new view controller. So we're either going to like go from question to question, or we're moving on to the next screen. And it says, how will the app know what to do? And we're going to have to create the logic that determines whether or not to make what we call a segue after receiving an answer to the current question. If you were to create a segue by control dragging from the input control to the next view controller, it would force the segue to take place whenever the player interacts with the control. Instead, you can invoke a segue programmatically between the second and third view controllers. control drag from the view controller icon above the second view controller to the third view controller and create a show segue thing. Okay, so they're showing that here in this image. So this is what we're going to try to do here, right? So we're in the second screen. We're going to control drag from that control to that last screen. So I'm going to give that a try, and hopefully I succeed. All right, so I want to kind of get the screens arranged so that will work nicely. So I'm going to click on this one. We're going to click on that first control, and then we're going to control drag from here to here. All right. And then we're going to create a show segue. So in other words, when we're done with the one screen, the next screen will show. And I want you to notice too, as that happens, it creates this little graphic in between, right? To show that there is a segue that links the pages together, right? Now it says highlight the segue in the storyboard. So you see how I clicked on it there. And then use the attributes inspector to give it an identifier string called results. So we're going to go to the attributes, and then the identifier is going to be called results, like that. And it says here, as you've already learned, when you embed the root view controller in a navigation controller, the show segue will adapt from a modal presentation to a right to left push in your quiz. When the player has answered the last question, you can push to the final view to display the results. So this kind of handles that piece, is what they're telling us. All right. Should all three view controllers be contained in the navigation controller? All right. Remember that a modal presentation is the right choice whenever the context of your app will change. And it's a context shift when the player transitions from the intro screen to the question screen. That means the first view controller should modally present a view controller contained in a navigation controller. So it says select the second view controller, which is already selected here. And actually, it's not. That's a segue that's selected. Right, so now I'm selecting the second view controller. Then click the embed button and choose navigation controller. So down here, I'm going to select navigation controller. Let's see how I did that. Let's go ahead and do that. Now you notice what it does, right? It throws a piece in there that comes before the second screen, and you see like how the icons are different, right? It says create a show segue from the first view controller's button to the navigation controller. This gives the user the ability to start the quiz. So if I'm reading that correctly, I think we're going to imitate what we did before, right? Okay, so we're going to hit the first view controller, and then we're going to control drag from here to the navigation controller. And I forget which one it has us do here. So I'm going to redo that because and it's a show segue. Okay, so it's the same one we did before. So control drag. I'm going to choose show, and then that will add that little graphic in between. And I'm going to like to spread these out just a little bit so you can see the icons. All right. So now we're linking all the pages together. So now we need to create the results screen. It says after the player has finished the quiz, the app will display the results along with a short description. The player should have some way to dismiss the results and return to the introduction screen so that another player can take the quiz. And here's an example of the interface, and they have a little, picture of you are a dog, and it says a bunch of stuff underneath it. So basically, we're going to go to that last screen now. And do you notice what happened? I don't know if you guys are catching this. Do you notice that last screen now has a back button?
Yeah, I just saw that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's by virtue of the navigation controller, right? So I think it's kind of like an interesting little addition that just kind of happens. And there's an example of the interface here. And if you look in the book on this, I'm just going to pull it over, right? they also are going to have a done button. So what now that we're going to get to the point where we're going to kind of like build all this, but it says now that you've embedded the result screen in a navigation controller, a navigation bar is available for placing titles and buttons as long as the view controller has a navigation item. And then we're going to add that right now. So that's kind of our next step. All right, so let's just follow the step-by-step here and see where we get. All right. So update the final view controller's title to results. So we're going to come up here, click it, and we're going to title it results. Now, in the attributes inspector for its navigation item, or simply double click in the navigation item. And I think what's happening here is our navigation item is being obscured by the top of the screen. And I think it's because of the iPhone format that we're choosing. So this is an iPhone 14 Pro, right? I think they're using an iPhone 13, which doesn't have that little camera bump out. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch here. I'm going to go down one gen. If I can find it, that is. Let's see what it brings up as a list here. Okay, it's not really giving me a lot of options. Okay, let's switch it down here then, see if we can do an iPhone 13 Pro. I'm still not seeing it.
I think you're clicked on it.
Yeah, I think so. I think what I need to do now is type results here, I think. Yep, there you go. And I'm not liking how that sits, but it is what it is. It says add a done button that dismisses the results and returns to the introduction screen. So drag a bar button item from the object library to the right side of the navigation item. All right, so here we go. And this is a bar button. Bar button item. And we're going to drag it up here. And we're going to call it done. All right. And it says update the bar button system item attribute to done, which also automatically changes the text and the font of the button. Right? And I don't know if you guys are good there. I'm not super crazy about how results appears here though, still. And I'm not sure what I can really do about that at this point, but let's just roll with it. Could be worse, I suppose. I love the verbiage in here. It says, by now, you're a pro at positioning stack views with constraints. I don't quite feel that way myself, even though I've done the training a couple of times. It says to replicate the results screen, create a vertical stack with two labels. So we're on the results screen now. So we're going to be here, right? Use the align tool to center the stack vertically. Okay, so in other words, we need two labels that we're going to drag on here, and then we're going to put them into a stack view. So they're like, assuming you just know how to do this at this point, right? So they're not like giving you necessarily the step-by-step. So this is where we test our knowledge, basically, folks. So I'm going to create one label. I'll do another label. All right, we'll select both of them, and then we'll embed in a stack view. So now it does tell us how to add constraints. Use the align tool to center the stack vertically. So I'm going to come down here to one of these is the align tool right there. So we're going to I'm trying to look at their examples here as well, so I don't like screw this up. okay, we're gonna center it vertically. And is that what I did? Vertically in container. So we're adding that constraint. Did I get the whole darn stack view? I'm not really sure. So here, let me just make sure that both of those, okay, both of the labels are in there. They're just not looking very pretty. And then use the add new constraints tool to add the leading and trailing edges to 20. So this one, so this will be 20 and 20. All right. But yeah, it really changed the layout of it. All right. But it seems to be like at least they're together now. So for the first label, it says use system font 50. So I'm gonna just type that in. It's a little easier than scrolling through all those numbers. And 17 for the second one, which it's already set to. Set the alignment for both to be centered, and you can highlight both of them and click the center. So now we're much closer to getting to where they're at on the screen. It says the second label will describe more about the results and will likely run to multiple lines. So you want to use the line attributes on the second label set to 0, right? So that allows for multiple lines. Otherwise, it'll constrain it to whatever the number is. And the line break should be set to word wrap. So here I'm going to switch this to word wrap. So it says your scene should end up with 2 centered labels, top one larger than the one below. All right, you guys good?
I need to get caught up. So
All right, we'll just wait for you.
that top label is what size?
That's a
50.
50. All right, so now we're moving on to page 555 in the book. And it says create descriptive subclasses. Now that you have 3 view controllers in your storyboard scene, you'll need 3 user or UI view controller subclasses in code. And we'll create a new file by choosing file, new file from xcode menu bar. So, all right, so we're going to come up top here, create a new file. It's going to be a Swift file. Oh, actually, it's going to be a Cocoa Touch class. This is new for us, I think.
It is.
Yeah, and this is a new starting template then for us. All right, so you choose that. Make sure you're for iOS. Choose next. Yeah, so it says the subclass pop-up menu should be set to UI view controller, which of course makes sense. This will automatically append the name view controller to the thing. And I don't know if they told us what to name it. Let's see if I can figure that out from their screenshot here. So it's going to be question view controller. So if you want to append question to it. It's a good thing I have the screenshot because I don't think they say here to name it that. Oh, it does. Okay, next sentence. Name the class question view controller. You know, if you just read, you know, the instructions are actually there, and click next. All right, the language is obviously Swift. Then we'll go to the group pop-up menu should list a folder that matches the name of the project personality quiz. So choose that, which it's already chosen, and then click create. So in other words, this is basically a touch interface that we're throwing in. So like, this is important for iOS apps, right? And this is kind of a template. And it's like, okay, we're creating this file that's going to control the interface. What are we attaching it to? So it's attached to this project. That's basically what we're doing. Now it says repeat these steps to create a second class, naming it results view controller. When you're finished, you'll see the two files in the project navigator for your quiz. So let's see if we can do that without coaching this time. Once again, a new file, Cocoa Touch class. Next, this one will be called results. So we'll append results here. Click next. Personality quiz is selected and click create. All right. And so now we will see both a question view controller and the results view controller. Right. You'll notice that these also have a view did load that drops in, that the UI kit is imported directly in because that's what we're building, as a user interface. So we have created two new files. It says you might also notice that the project navigator lists a subclass of UI view controller called view controller. I'm not noticing that, but that's what they're indicating here. So that's a subclass. So this is a terminology. We haven't talked about this a lot, but whenever you create a class file, this character in this language indicates that we're extending a different class. So we have a super class that we're feeding information from. So if you guys have done the Java course, and Jonathan, you should probably be on this, right? When we have a super class in Java, we say extends. Here we use a colon. So that's just a difference in terminology. All right. The iOS app template automatically assigns this name to your app's first view controller. To be more descriptive, click the file name and change it to introduction view controller. So in other words, this one, right, we're going to change its name. So we're going to right click, and I'm not sure how you rename from this menu. I don't know if we can just click in there and just do it. Yep, we sure can. So we're going to name this introduction view controller. So that basically we have a separate view controller for each one of the files. And I don't know if you guys noticed this as I was in that panel changing the name, you could see that there was a file extension at the end too, the .swift, right? Which is kind of neat. Next, open the file and change the class name to match. So in other words, now we need to take a look at this, and this won't work correctly because a class name, and this is true in other C style languages too, the class name has to match the file name in order for it to execute. So here we're going to insert introduction to make it valid. All right, so now it says, now your project has 3 descriptively named UI view controller subclasses. Reopen the main storyboard, and then one at a time, select each view controller and use the identity inspector to assign the appropriate custom class. The first view controller will be introduction view controller, followed by question and results view controller. All right, so let's go back to the main storyboard. We'll click on each one. And this will go under attributes, right? This is attributes, right? See, I don't even know them yet. Use the identity inspector. That's this one, the non-slider one. And so now we got to change the class file name to match. That's the point, is to make sure that these are all in sync. Otherwise it won't work. So introduction view controller. I'm just going to press tab to lock it in. I'm going to go to well, that's the navigation controller. We don't have to worry about that. But now we're going to go to the question view controller. And I don't know if this is going to let us change this. All right, so I shouldn't have probably clicked on that. Not sure why it's not letting us. Okay, so here we go. I am able to select it from a list. You guys catching that?
Yeah.
Yep, so I'm gonna switch it to question view controller, because it's a pre-configured item now, right? So we can just select it from the list. And then we'll click on the last screen and then do the same thing, but this will be results view controller if it's even an option. All right, so I got to make sure I right here I was like clicking into the interface as opposed to clicking into there, so it should be available now. All right, let me know when you guys are good.
Good.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so now we're moving on to part 3. So we're at the bottom of page 557. So we're going to look at basically 3 different types of questions that we're going to answer: a single answer, a multiple answer, and a ranged response. And now it says, now take some time to come up with your list of questions and think about how you can reword each question to fit one of the 3 categories. So we're going to kind of like follow their examples on this, right? So the single answer questions, suppose you ask, which food do you like the most? The answer might include a list of 4 foods, and the player must pick one. What kind of control would you use? The simple approach would be to present a button for each answer, organized in a vertical stack view. So begin by dragging a vertical stack view from the library to the question view controller. So we're going to make sure that this is highlighted. We'll bring up our object library, and we're going to add a vertical stack view. So I'm going to search for that. I'm going to spell it correctly, of course. I'm just going to drag it in here and let go. Now, I'm not sure if it makes sense here to like fill the whole screen, but I am going to make mine bigger and then kind of center it on the page. We can always adjust it. I'm just kind of dropping it in the middle there. You good?
Well, what did you select for the objects?
Vertical stack view.
Okay.
And that's an easy one to misspell, by the way. Is it vertical or vertical? You know, like CLE. You could tell I mistyped it when I was looking for it, so don't feel bad if you do. Now it says add 4 buttons to the stack view and use the align tool to center the stack vertically within the view. All right, let's do that. So let's come up here. I'm going to choose the object library. We're going to add 4 buttons. So I'm just going to start dropping them in there. And that's a little weird what just happened there. All right, so I'm going to Command Z that. And let's see if we can. Well, here's our stack view. I'm going to try that again. I just thought the way that interface responded was a little strange. All right, not centering it, but and what I think I might do here is just keep doing it, and then we'll worry about aligning them and everything in the aftermath. All right. So we got the 4 buttons are dragged in. It says use the align tool to center the stack vertically within the view. So let's see if I can do that here. I think this is the right one.
I think we need to make sure those buttons are under the stack view. If you look on your left.
Yeah, you're right. Totally right. So I should move them, and you can see I'm just using the sidebar here to do that. Yeah, they were not inside the same structure, were they? Okay, well, now they're aligning pretty nicely, right? But let's select all of them, and it might actually be easier to select them here, I think, and then we'll put them center in the container like that. Now the stack view itself, I'm not sure if Yeah, because I did not center the stack vertically within the view and then add. Okay, so I'm trying to read the directions here and see if I can make sense of them. Okay, so I centered, I think, the buttons. I'm going to Control Z what I did, right? And then I'm going to select the stack view and align that vertically in the container. All right, it still kind of gives me that same effect, and I'm not sure why. And it said add space, add new constraints. Use the add new constraints tool to set its leading and trailing edges to 20. So I'm just going to follow through with the directions here, see kind of where it brings me. All right. And then add space between the buttons by setting the spacing to 20 in the attributes inspector. So let's get these constraints in there first. And then the attributes inspector, this is it. That's going to go to 20. All right, so that now we can finally see them again. If necessary, click the update frames button. And mine's not appearing, so I'm guessing it's not necessary. To reposition the stack based on the constraints that you've created. All right. So this is what it is right now. Not the prettiest thing in the world, but it is what it is. I'm really curious as to why that button is so much taller than the others. I'm just kind of looking at its. And I think it's maybe because of the size and the shape of the stack view is really what's going on. All right, let's just have faith and go with it.
Okay.
All right. We're going to assume that Apple will set us straight eventually. All right. All right, so trying to read through on the instructions here. Yeah, these instructions get a little convoluted. All right. I mean, the top three, I think, look okay. I think it's just kind of weird that last one is just strange. All right. Not super worried about it. Right. Of course, the button titles will change based on the answers you provide. You'll update them later when you move on to coding the quiz. All right, so that's going to be part of our coding. All right, so we're going to have now another question we're going to throw in. And the question, which of the following foods do you like? And I'm just kind of wondering here, we didn't miss a step here because they didn't really ask us to put in a label on this or anything on the screen that we have right now. But it looks like when we go to the next one, they're going to have us do that. So, all right. So the question, which of the following foods you like, suggests that the player can choose multiple answers rather than using buttons for the answers. It would make more sense to create pairs of labels and switches so the player can switch on all positive answers. And then when the player has made their selections, they can tap a button to submit the answers and move on to the next question. All right. So before you begin, you might want to hide the single answer stack view. So select the stack view in the storyboard. And so I'm doing it like this in the sidebar, right? Or the outline, and then open the attributes inspector and deselect installed at the bottom of the pane. And I'm not seeing that. Is that the attributes inspector?
It's at the very bottom.
Oh, yeah, there it is. All right. So it's giving you a little bit of a clue as to how this is working. So all the stuff is present. It's just they're not showing it all to you at the same time. Kind of an interesting approach. The switch UI is not much different than from the button UI. Each label and switch pair can be held in a horizontal stack view. Just like the single answer question, the rows can be held in a vertical stack view. All right. So begin by adding a label and a switch from the object library both of them, highlight both of them, and then click embed in. All right, so let's do a label and a switch. So we'll start with that. All right, so here comes the label. And then I'm going to search for switch, right? And we'll try to align them. Highlight both of them. So you can command click or highlight them both in the side panel there. And then choose embed in. Choose stack view. And then make sure that it's set to horizontal and that the alignment and distribution are both set to fill, which they are. Okay. So we're good there. All right, now I didn't set mine up exactly like theirs. Theirs are like really tight. So maybe I'll fix that, but you know, not a big deal, I think. Select the stack, then copy, Command C, and the stack is already selected. So, and then Command V to add 3 copies. 1. So apparently I was copying from the wrong thing. So here's my, and you know what? I'm gonna make sure I'm copied there. So copy, and then got to get out of that mode here. Now copy, and then paste, paste, paste. And it doesn't look real pretty right now, but don't freak out to it yet. That's what I'm going to suggest. All right. Now select all 4 horizontal stacks. So that would be this. It might be better to collapse them here and then just do this. And click the embed button. And then we're going to put those in the stack view. All right. Once again, we're encapsulating them all together. Now you see them pop up on the screen, right? In the attributes inspector for this new set the axis to vertical, did it automatically, and distribution and fill. Alignment and distribution should be to fill, and spacing between elements to 20. So it's a little better. Okay. I think one takeaway here is like, don't freak out to what the interface looks like because it'll correct itself, right? So there's kind of like a hiccup that happens until you kind of set it right. All right, so next step is add a button to the bottom of the stack and set its title to submit answer. All right, so the way that I think I'm going to do this is I'm going to maybe drop it over to the side panel here rather than try to put it in here somewhere. So I have it highlighted, and now I'm going to take a button and I'm going to drag it and put it here. So it should be on the same level as the stack view, and you see it kind of pop up that way. If it doesn't go in the right spot, you can kind of change its hierarchy there in the side panel. We're going to change its title to submit answer. Actually, I'm going to fix that, make that a capital A. Finally, use the align tool to center the stack vertically within the view. And I'm trying to see where they're doing that, like which tool they're actually using. So they're using the protractor. All right, so that makes sense. So they're using this panel. And I'm trying to make sure I'm doing this right, folks. So looking at all their settings. I don't see position view with.
Is it the under a range?
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, well actually, see if I do that. Oh yeah, it does. It still has a position view though, right? Okay, so it did it. Yeah, that is correct, Jonathan. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, then it says use the add new constraints tool to set the leading and trailing edges to 20 pixels from each margin. It's kind of becoming routine at this point, right? All right, and that spreads us out. If necessary, use the update frames button, and I want you to notice that for the first time it's appearing for me. To reposition the frames based on the constraints you just created. So I'm just going to click it. It didn't really seem to do much because I think it already did it, but there's an example of it actually becoming active for a change. All right, so that completes page 561. We're now moving on to page 562.
Hold on, mine is not stretching like yours did when I added the constraints.
All right, let me pause here. All right, Jomar, what's happening? Are you stuck too?
No, I was going to tell you you weren't recording, but now you are.
Oh, okay. Now I am. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awkward. Welcome to freeform teaching, folks. All right. All right. So, all right. So let's just repeat what we just said, right? So the third type of question might follow this format. How much you like this particular food? And basically what they're saying is you could use a slider as the input control, the label on either side of the slider. So that way they can give you an actual, more precise range, basically. Now, what we'll want to do is take this stack view that we just created. We'll go to this panel, I think that's just the attributes inspector, and we'll unclick installed. So that will now disappear also. So we created it, it's there, but we're not showing it, basically is what we're doing. We will programmatically control its appearance. All right. So we got that uninstalled. Now we can use stack views to create this interface without having to find very many constraints. Similar to the switch approach, begin by adding 2 labels to the canvas from the object library, then select both and click embed, choose stack view, and then set the axis to horizontal. Fill in distribution is set to equal spacing. That's a little bit different. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to create 2 labels. Here's one. Oops. There's the other. Kind of align them there. Select both. See how it comes a little bit routine after a while. It's like if you did this a lot, it would be like you'd be clicking through it like nothing. We're going to click embed, stack view. Axis is horizontal. That was done automatically, but they are saying fill in distribution should be set to equal spacing. And I don't even see that as an option.
I don't have that either.
Neither do I.
All right, and I'm looking at their graphic in the book on this. Okay. Oh, I see.
Oh, it's a
Alignment is
distribution.
set to fill. Distribution is set to equal spacing. So alignment doesn't have that option, but distribution does. Got that?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. It's like, don't read too fast because your brain, tells you something else sometimes. Next, drag a slider from the object library onto the same canvas. Select the slider and the horizontal. Okay, let's get the slider out there first. All right, so here comes the object library. We'll start searching for slider. There it is. I think the slider is going to sit above, so I'm just going to put it right above and center it. Kind of use the guides to help me a little bit. All right, then select the slider and the horizontal stack. So command click on both of them, so they're both highlighted. And then we'll use the embed. And then we'll choose stack view again. Make sure that the axis is set to vertical, which it is. Alignment and distribution are both set to fill, and spacing will be set to 20. So there we go. All right, now I know it kind of fell off kilter a little bit there, but we're not going to worry about that for the moment. It says add a button to the bottom of the stack and set its title to submit answer. So back to the object library. I'm going to take that and drop it in here.
Your alignment isn't set to fill there.
Ah, good catch. Very good catch. All right, yeah, so now you see the difference. All right, so we're going to add, lost track of my
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail
Oh,
you.
no, it's okay, because now we're adding it to this stack. And so where we want it to end up is right underneath that stack view, right? So let's hit the object library here. Let's grab a button. And instead of putting it on the storyboard, I'm putting it here because I feel like I'll have more control if I do it that way. So there we go. And that's exactly why I did it that way, because I feel like it's easy to put it in the wrong spot down below. Now use the align tool to center the stack vertically within the view. So that's the align tool, the little button there. Then use the add new constraints tool to align the leading and trailing edges to 20. And so that should make it behave, I'm hoping. And they're saying you might want to use, and I'm not sure if that worked out exactly as I anticipated. So I'm going to Command Z my way back. I'm going to get rid of all the constraints, basically. There we go. And so, okay, so I'm going to select the stack view, and I think this is where I failed, right? And then I'm going to use the align tool, center vertically. Okay, I think it did it. You know, it's not very, I'm not very confident on this. And then use the add constraints to do 20 and 20. And I think this should work now, because you notice how the one number was negative there. So we're going to add those, and there it is. Now it popped into place. It's all about what you have in position. Again, it gives a little warning. If necessary, use the update frames button to reposition the frames based on the constraints you've created. Right. All right. So before you move on, you'll need to re-enable the stack views that you uninstalled during the building process. So in the document outline, select each stack view and then select installed checkbox in the attribute inspector. So this one is installed. The next one is installed. It will make it look like hell, right? So just, you know, be aware. And that, right? So we want them all to be visible. Now we are going to use code to control them, basically. So don't freak out to this. All right. That completes page 565. And we're moving on to page 566. All right. Now it says question and label progress. No matter what kind of question you ask your players, you need to display it in a label. Add a label to the top of the view. Use the add constraints to position the label 20 pixels below the navigation bar and 20 pixels from the leading and trailing margins. All right, so they're giving us a lot of directives here, but we're basically going to add a big label up here that's going to be the question. That's really what they're telling us to do. And so I'm making sure that I'm going to be outside of any of those stack views. So I'm going to click on the view up here at the top. This is where I want to be. All right. And if you want, you can just kind of click up here too. You can, selects the same thing. We're going to drag in a label, kind of put it in the middle. And now we're going to follow the steps. So we added the label and use the add new constraints to position the label 20 pixels below the navigation bar. So that the top one here is going to be 20. And then 20 from the left and the right. So we'll do 20 and 20. And I think we're probably good there. So I'll just add those constraints. In the attributes inspector, set the text alignment to center. So we'll click the center button. Set the system font to 32. I like doing it this way. I think it's a little faster. There's 32. Set the lines attribute to 0 so that we can have multiple lines. And change the line break attribute to word wrap. So that's this one. And we'll go word wrap. All right, so multiple lines and they'll wrap automatically. So on page 567, it says players often like to know how far along in the quiz they are. So search for progress view in the object library and add it to the view. Okay, so I'm going to click out of the label there and just going to click at the bottom of the screen here. So the view is active in the sidebar. Back to the object library, and we're looking for progress view. And we're going to put that down here at the bottom somewhere. All right. Now we're going to use the add new constraints tool to position it 20 from the bottom and 20 from the left and right. All right. So 20, 20, and 20. And if you're wondering how I'm bouncing around, I'm using the tab key, by the way. Now that puts it way down there. I'm not sure I like that, real frankly, but hey, it is what it is. Right? We're just following instructions. I might lift it up a little higher. Moving on to page 568, and we're moving on to part 4. And I think, you know what, let's take a quick 5-minute break, you guys. We've been going for a while again, just to kind of take a breather from this for a second. So I'll see you in 5 minutes.
Sounds good.
All right, we're back from break and we're moving into part 4. So we're at the bottom or the top of page 568 in the book, and the title on this section is Models and Outlets. And if you're not picking up on that, well, we know what outlets are, right? Because we've done those. So you have to create outlets for all your user interface controls to be able to write code for them. But a model, and this is something we really haven't talked about a lot, is where we build either structs or enums for data that we're going to use in the program. And what I think is really kind of neat about this is, often when you're building an app, you're trying to base it on data and some sort of a structured approach. And it's really kind of helpful to have a model in mind and to code off of. So you build the data models often first before you write the code that controls the app, so and that's really what we're kind of doing here. So basically they're saying now it's time to create structures that hold question data that will update the user interface based on the value of each question and answer. And once data has been laid out, you can update the user interface based on which question is being displayed. Create a new file named question to hold the model definition. So we're going to go back in here and create a new file. So we're going to go to File, New File. We're going to create a Swift file this time. Click on Next. We're going to name this question. Making sure I got all the commands here. All right, now I think that's all we need to do. All right, and there it is. All right, so now inside here, we're going to build a struct. And we're going to follow their approach here on this, but if you wanted to change this into something else, of course you could. So we're going to call the struct question. We're going to create a few variables here. So one will be, which will be of type string. Another type of response type. Not sure if I'm typing that right, but that's not popping up as an option. So it doesn't really matter. And var answers, which will be an array of answer. Like that. That's one of our structures. All right. Now I'm not sure if this is normal for it to throw an error like this. All right, so basically the reason it's throwing an error here is we haven't created this type, and really what we're going to do now, and you'll see this on the bottom of page 568, by the way, is now we're going to create an enum, or an enumeration is really what we call it programmatically, and now we're going to define response type here. Right, so the reason it's throwing an error is because we haven't created it yet, and we're going to create three different cases here, three different possibilities. One would be single, the other will be multiple, and then the other will be ranged. No, this is matching up with the types of questions that we have. So we have a single answer question, a multiple answer question, and a ranged question. All right. Now we're still getting an error because can't find answer in scope either, right? So that's also going to become a struct. And they're making a little point here. It says every answer corresponds to a result type. In the animal example, suppose you ask which of these foods you like most. Possible answers are steak, fish, and carrots. And then the possible in each response corresponds to dog, cat, and rabbit, etc. So if the answers property was an array of strings, then there wouldn't simply be a way to associate the answer with a particular result. Instead, answer struct will have a string to display to the player and a type that the property ties to the answer to a specific result. All right, I know that's kind of a mouthful because I read it as fast as I possibly could because I want to get this over with, basically, but you can read it in the book for yourself. But basically, we need to build the structures. And once again, so this is a struct, so we're going to define a thing called text, which is of type string, and then another one, which is of type. So we're going to have the same issue here once again. So we have to create an enum for this, which is animal type. So that should throw an error until we, or it's interesting that it didn't. All right, and I think, yeah, the compiler was just taking a moment there to catch up. And now we're going to create the enum and call it animal type. And then it's going to be of type character. So in other words, it will be one singular emoji here in this case. So we're going to set up several cases. Now, when you do these case statements, by the way, you can actually do them on separate lines. So for example, I could do dog equals, and now we're going to put in the emoji that we want, right? So remember the shortcut for that, command control space, and there's my dog. And unfortunately, all my animals are kind of already in there. And so one way to do these case statements is you just do them all on a separate line, right? But the author and a lot of experienced programmers will just do comma separated versions. So I'm going to opt for that as well. And here I'm going to do command space, control command space, and we'll choose our cat. Add another comma. We'll choose our rabbit. Control space. Rabbit in there. And one more for turtle. Already there. And now we should be good, and the errors will go away in just a moment. All right, so we've created two structs and two enums, right? And I'll have you notice like how the enums are different than a struct, right? A struct has variables in it, so we can put data in there and change it, right? Once we utilize it. An enum, on the other hand, is a set value, right? So if you look at the animal types, which are character, why? Because emojis are technically one single character, they're not a string, right? And these are preset. So a dog will always equate to the emoji of a dog, and a cat will always equate to an emoji of a cat, and so on, right? And that's locked in. So that's the difference kind of between an enum and a struct, but it is structured information. And as I mentioned before, it's really useful for kind of building apps and driving interfaces in apps. All right. And it says now on page 570, typically at the end of a personality quiz, the player receives some text about the outcome of the quiz. Since you've already defined an enum to represent each personality type, or in this case, animal type, you could include a definition property that will be presented as a label on the results screen. So here's an example of the definition for the animal types. So they have this code on page 570 in the book. I don't know if I can just copy paste it. I can try. This might not paste very beautifully, by the way, because I think what Apple does is they put a citation in here. But hey, you know what? Let's give it a shot, right? You see what it did to me? Yeah, it changed all my quotes to smart quotes. You catching that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
almost
and
more
I
work
quoted
than
the
it's
whole
worth.
thing and gave me an excerpt. So I don't know if I want to fix this. I think I'm just going to try to fix it. So get rid of the opening and closing quotes. And then here where the pets are, we have to change it from smart quotes, which are on an angle, to up and down quotes, a little cumbersome. And we have to do that for all the double quotes here in this whole section. So kind of, I guess it's easier than typing it, I suppose. And you know what? Now that I'm kind of figuring this out, I really don't need to recreate this because this part we've already done, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And really what we want to do is we want to add the definition part of it from below. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to blow away those curly brackets. So it's really all of this that I want to copy. Let's fix the double quotes first, and then we'll move it into the enum. And then hopefully everything will be a-okay. You know it's fixed when the colors fix, right? I'm trying to be patient here. I know that it's not going to clear. Yeah, this is not pretty, right? See if this is fixable. If it's not, we'll just retype it. I'm kind of concerned with the errors up on lines 34 and 36. All right, you know what?
No, I figured it out.
Yeah.
You see the black text. So in front of like focus or doing, delete that till it goes up to the next line.
So it's yeah, you know what? Good catch, Jomar.
I tried.
Well, you know what? I appreciate it, because I don't always see the solution myself. So really what we're saying is that's all one line.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we still have to fix the double quotes though. But collapsing these down helps as well. Whoever created smart quotes.
Yeah, seriously.
Right. It was probably Microsoft, but you know what? It comes from the print world. They just did it because, the print world does it where they have, the quotes that curl up and the quotes that curl down. So I think we're okay now. All right, so here's the problem right now. We got to take this whole structure. Now I'm getting like errors here. So I do have to add one more curly bracket at the end. I can fix that error. But now it's saying that this isn't found in scope, right? Because we're not inside the enum. So I'm going to take all this and cut it. And then I'm going to put it inside the enum curly brackets here. Now it should hopefully go away. Okay, that was a little bit of work. Would have almost been easier to type it, right? But I don't want to type all that, so it is what it is. All right, moving on to page 571. And it says display questions and answers. The question view controller will hold the array of question objects in a property called questions. As you create the objects, you need to take special care with how many answer objects you place in the answers property. When you built stack views for single and multiple answer responses, you created 4 buttons and 4 switches to represent a static number of possible answers. So any question you create with a type property that's set to single or multiple must have exactly 4 answer objects. For the range response, you can get away with only 2 answers, the 2 ends of the slider, but it would be better to define 4 possible ranges so the question can give points to each of the 4 outcomes. The collection of answers for range response needs to be in some sort of order from least likely to most likely, for example, so that you can accurately assign the answers to a result. All right, so I'm moving on to page 572. I'm just reading, verbatim what they have here. So if you take a look, and I'm not sure I'm going to be crazy about copying all these double quotes. Right? We'll see how that goes. Right, so here's the structure that we're pulling in here. It says, in the following example, the array is filled with a question of each response type, single answer, multiple answer, and ranged response. Right. So I'm assuming here that we want to add this here to this file as well. And so I want you to see what the strategy is here if you're not picking up on it, that we're driving all the data for the app from a code file rather than hard coding it onto the screen. That way the app can become dynamic, and then we change the code file to drive the interface rather than the other way around. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get that transferred. So all that code needs to be transferred over, you guys. And I don't know how you guys want to do it. I'm tempted to try to do a copy paste.
It
and
works.
just kind of deal with the aftermath of it, because I think it's still less work than typing the whole thing. But make sure you get all the modifiers there, right? And so here goes. Trying to
It's
be
not
brave.
that bad. It worked just fine.
You know what? I could be clever about this too, and I could. Okay, well, the interestingly, the double quotes here in all the answers, are you catching that? And the text are all the right ones. It's just the opening and closing ones that are bad. So let's get rid of this one. And this one. And this nonsense at the end. We know where it came from, but if you guys are wondering, there's the book. And then we also have a non-breaking space, which is a formatting character. So I'm going to delete that. See that little yellow underline there, get rid of that. So that should clear that other error too. All right. And all right, I think we're okay. All right. All right, so I think we're good here. On page 573, it says display questions with the right controls. Now that you have a list of questions to draw from, you'll need to keep track of which ones your app has already displayed and to calculate when you've displayed them all. One technique is to use an integer as an index into the questions collection, and this integer will start at 0, the index of the first element, and then you'll increment the value by 1 after the player answers each question. So add a property called question index to your question view controller. So we're switching files now.
Hey, can I just point something out real quick?
Yeah. You want me to go back?
Oh, wait, you know what? Never mind. Okay.
You're good?
I'm using the wrong version book than you guys are. Everything's been the same except for instead of dog, mine says lion. And it threw me for a loop for a second. I was like, did I miss when lion was introduced?
Well, that's just so I'm guessing the people that do the training can keep the version straight, right?
Yeah.
Let's just change one of the animals. I don't want to change all of them.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch
Okay.
back over to the question view controller. All right. And then we're going to add a property called question index. So I'm going to do this above the view did load. So we're just going to throw it up here. And it should just say var, and it should be question index equals 0. 0 to start, right? That's the first position. And then it says, as the player moves from question to question, we need to show the correct stack view and to hide the other two. But before you can write the code that changes the stack view's visibility, you'll need to create the necessary outlets and actions. So that's our next page. So moving on to page 574.
Before we go on,
Sure.
can you guys copy and paste the code from that last step that we did, where it was the questions?
Yeah, I got
Sure.
it.
Thank you.
My I was having troubles getting it to select
Oops, it's too
correctly.
long. So I got to chop it up.
Yeah, and I think this is interesting when you look at how they set this up. This is a variable structure, right? They're naming it questions, and it's a question array, right? And then each question, right, has a complicated structure, which is the text of the question, the type, and the answers, right? And then inside answers is an array of answer objects, right? So this is really a complicated little structure. It looks kind of sort of like JSON or something, but it's not. I think interesting. And we're getting into some like more complicated structures, but these things are actually defined here. So question is defined here. So question has text, type, and answers with an array of answers, right? So if you look down here, question has text, type, and answers with an array of answers.
It reminds me of when we're going adding entries into MongoDB and Python.
Precisely. Yeah, it's very, very similar. And so it gives you actually a clue as to, where the concept comes from, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very much so. And actually I like that correlation quite a bit. All right, now if you're still working on this, I'm going to try to move on to this next page here. So we're moving on to page 574. And you know what? I'll pull the book over for just a minute as I'm doing the recording here. It says open the main storyboard and select the question view controller. Open an assistant editor view to the question view controller alongside your storyboard. So you're going to look at the question view storyboard and the question view controller code, right? And then what we're going to do, and if you look, kind of arrange your screens nicely, this is the whole point of why I'm pulling it over. It makes it easier to do the control drags. And I don't know if you're catching, but here, and they're making this, I think, a point here that it might be easier to control drag from the panel over to the code than from here over to the code, because it's harder to grab the exact object that you're looking for. I'll just zoom in here so you'll see, like, for example, we're going to grab the stack view and then we're going to drag it in to do an outlet. And that's going to be a repetitive process. And okay, so let's get the book out of the way again. But I just thought it's kind of helpful to show that. And so I'm going to read this through again. Let's get the question view controller up on the screen, right? And maybe the easier way to do this is if you put the main storyboard up, and then I forget if it's I think it's a command click, if I remember right. So if I click here, command click, no, that wasn't it. Maybe it's option click. Yeah, there we go, option click. All right. Yeah, I always forget, like, which keystroke commands we're doing, but we want to be looking at the question view controller. So this one, right? Which is the one that we have up on screen here. You'll notice that my stacks are kind of nicely collapsed here so that we can easily access them. And then the code is set up in a way that we can kind of drag the stuff over and kind of start creating the outlets. But let's just do this one at a time here. So going back to 574 to read the instructions. So we have the main storyboard up with the question view controller in view. We opened an assistant editor, so we see the code for that file here. And now we're going to control drag from the single answer stack view to the definition of the question view controller class, right? Which is up here. And then verify the connection type is outlet, enter single stack view into the name, and then click connect, and then repeat the steps for the others. So let's just do this one. How do I know I'm looking at the right one? It's real frankly, it's very hard to tell, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm opening it up. Right. Okay, so I'm gonna grab that first one. This is why it's helpful to have that side panel, frankly. I'm going to be dragging over to this spot, but you know what? I'm going to create some space for it just so it just flows a little bit better. All right, so here comes my control drag. We're choosing outlet, right? The name is going to be single stack view.
1 second.
All right. If I'm going too fast, we will repeat these. So don't freak out. Don't freak
It's
out.
not that the Zoom class just the Zoom window closed out basically.
Oh no.
Yeah.
You lost the view?
I lost the view.
Or is it a bandwidth issue maybe?
No, just Zoom itself being difficult. Okay, there we go.
All right. All right. So once we have that in place, go ahead and click connect. Drop it in. So it should kind of look like that. The next one is the multiple stack view. And if you want to kind of remember, that's where it's got multiple stacks inside of it. That's why we are calling it that. Once again, control drag. Excuse me, I'm about to sneeze, I think. Excuse me. We're calling that one multiple stack view. Go ahead and click connect. Create a little bit more space here. So it's a nice clean spot to land. And you guys notice that as I drag it over, how the name changed here also? I don't know if you caught that or not, but yeah. All right, so now I'm going to do a control drag again.
I'm having issues.
I'll have issues, John.
Yeah.
All right, give me a second and I'll take a look.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Just click the connect. Okay, so I think I'm okay. So let me pause really quick on the recording. I'm sure people, if they watch this on the internet, they're just going to get, just going to be laughing, I hope. Now reading the bottom paragraph at the bottom of page 574, it says, next, create a reusable method called update UI that you can call before displaying each question to the player. You should call this method in view.load to set the proper interface for the first question. So here in the code, and I'm assuming you guys are seeing my screen.
Mhm.
I'm going to just expand our code here a little bit so it's easier to read. So first I'm going to create the func. If you want to do marks and stuff for all your funcs, you could do that. You can see they created a navigation area here, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm more concerned about just getting this coded. So we'll call this update UI, parens, open and close curly brackets. And then here in the view.load, we're going to call it, and we'll just say update UI, and there it is. All right, so the update UI method is going to be responsible for updating a few key pieces of the interface, including the title in the navigation bar and the visibility of the stack views. You can use the question index property to create a unique title. For example, question number 4 in the navigation for each item for each question. I don't know if that reads well in the navigation item for each question. Okay, whatever. With the stack views, it's easiest if you hide all 3 stack views, then inspect the type property of the question to determine which stack should be visible. So you can use the question index property in conjunction with the questions collection to access the particular question. So they give us the code here on page 575 for that interface. And I'm going to suggest, to save time here, that you just copy and paste. And I think, what's kind of fascinating is when I did the training with the NC3 people, they had provided all of the code in like on a LMS page, right? Which really saved a lot of time during the session, right? Because if you were typing everything manually, some people did, and I'm kind of being silly here because I copied the whole function. So I'm going to replace all of this. And I realize I have these bad quotes and all this excerpt stuff, which I'm going to blow away. And then hopefully I don't have too many problems. We have these non-breaking spaces I'm deleting. Let's see if the compiler catches up with me here. I'll give it a second. And then we have some smart quotes to eliminate. That sure is a whole lot easier than typing this stuff from scratch. All right. We're at the point where we're going to do a build and run, believe it or not. And if you set everything up properly, the stack view that's visible should correspond to the first question you define in the questions property. So try reordering the questions to test each interface. And I'm not sure I'm going to do that process. I'm just telling you that right now, just because of time constraints. But let's give it a shot. Let's do a build and run. Cross your fingers and hope it actually builds. All right. Well, that's a good sign. Let's get the simulator launching here. There it is, and it's loading up. You can tell we're pushing the machine a little harder. Well, at least the first screen came up. The rabbit's in the wrong place. I don't know if you guys are catching that.
Yeah.
Not a big problem, but yeah, I don't know why they push them all into the corners. Why don't they just put them kind of in the middle? But whatever. All right, so we're gonna click begin, and that should ideally take us to the next screen, but it is not. So I must have something wrong there.
Can you guys copy and paste that text, the code? I am struggling.
I got it.
Not a problem, John.
These whatever those non-breaking spaces are. Oh my Lord.
Yeah, they're ruining your day, aren't they?
It is.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pause the video here for a moment.
I'm glad
We're trying to figure out why our app isn't going from the intro screen over, and it looks like on page 550 we just missed the one sentence 5-word instruction to do it, and it says create a show segue from the first view controller's button to the navigation controller. So I assume that we just highlight the button, right? So there it is highlighted, and then we do a control drag over to the navigation controller, and then we're going to do a show segue. And it says right there, this gives the user the ability to start the quiz. All right. So you know what? Let's build and run now and see what happens. So here's the run. Build succeeded, and we'll know if we're awesome when it works. Oh, well, hey, look at that. All right. Not the prettiest thing in the world, right? But it does say question number 1. I don't think the question's populating yet. So there's more code steps that we need to do here. I'm going to stop the run. But at least we got that problem fixed, right? I'm really tempted to try to fix the rabbit and put it where it belongs, but you know what? Not super critical. Now I'm going to take us back to the page where we left off on, and I'm trying to figure out what page that was now. So we were on page 575 where we added all the code to the update UI, right? So this was the step that we did, and then they told us to build and run. And it said the stack view that's visible should correspond to the first question you defined in the question's property, which I think is this, right? Okay, so I'm not sure that that's correlating, honestly, because try reordering the questions to test each. I'm not going to do that, real frankly, but if you wanted to, because I don't think it's actually working. What they're saying is you just take this and move this one to the top, for example. Okay, I'm not too worried about that right now. Let's move on to the next page and see if this kind of irons out as we kind of go forward. So now on page 576, it says update the buttons and label text. All right, so that sounds like where we need to go, because that wasn't really appearing, right? The interface on your question screen works, but you still need to update the button titles and label text to make this happen. You'll need to create outlets for the labels and buttons associated with each stack view. So there's going to be a whole lot of control dragging going on here. And I'm counting, looks like about maybe 20 maneuvers we have to make. In addition to the outlets that you create for the stack view, this screen requires 12 outlets for the controls and labels. So there's 4 button outlets in the single answer stack view, 4 label outlets in the multi-answer, 2 label outlets in the ranged, and you also have the label that displays the question near the top of the screen. All right, so oh my God, we have a lot to do. Okay, so let's just try to take this very, very systematically. And I think the smart way to do this is to use that side panel to find all our items, rather than try to find it in the interface visually, because I think that would be just, real frankly, a kind of a nightmare. All right, so with that in mind, I'm not even going to worry about the storyboard. And then I'm also going to kind of tidy up my code here a little bit, because since I know I'm adding a whole bunch of stuff, let's make it a little more concise. Okay, so we have outlets for each of the views. I think this label here, this is probably going to be our question label, I'm guessing, right? So let's start with that. We're also going to have to put in progress view. So these are on the global view. So I'm tempted to start with those two first. So I'm going to do this one first, and I'm going to control drag it over, and I'm going to put it underneath the stack views. I'm going to call this question label. Connect it, and then I'm going to see if it looks like the example that's provided. All right. Looks okay. All right, so now I feel a little bit more brave to proceed. Notice that by doing that, it did rename it here as well. All right, next I'm going to do the progress view. So I'm going to click on that one. Once again, control drag. And this one will be called question progress. We're really trying to be verbose here, basically, on all of these. All right, that looks good too. So far, so good. Making a little bit more space. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of group them. So these two are these are all the stacks. These are on the global view. And then we'll go into each individual stack view one at a time. So I'm going to start with the single one. And then I'm going to grab each one of the buttons. And this is kind of interesting. What the author did is he grouped the items in the stack view underneath each one of the stack views. So now I'm kind of tempted to do the same. Now I see the logic of that, right? So all of these will go in here. So let's do those one at a time. Control drag.
Before you do that, or after you do that, that's fine. When you drop down that range stack view, it didn't follow your marker on the side on your line counter, like that filled in circle.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. You know what? Yeah, I see it. Now I'm tempted. Okay. So it seems like it's still okay, like it's still connected, but
Yeah.
it's probably a matter of where I put my cursor when I pressed enter. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what it was.
All right, cool.
Kind of tells you a little bit about how the tool works then. All right, so I'm going to drag this one over, and they want us to call this single button 1. And as you can guess, next one will be single button 2. All right, try that one, drag again. Let's be real systematic with this. One more here. All right. And then I'm going to tidy them up a little bit so they're all together. Then I'm going to move on to the multiple stack view. And then notice, right, each one of these has a label and a switch. And just trying to think here. All right, so we're not really concerning ourselves with the switches, apparently, at least at this point. We're just concerning ourselves with the labels here. That's what the example shows, right? So that's what I'm doing. Right, so I'm going to grab first label, control drag it over, and I'm going to call that multi label 1. Just making sure it all is good. Okay, so it looks good. So I'm just going to keep following that procedure. Control drag. Multi label 2. Control drag. Multi label 3. And finally, it's going to be multi-label 4. My mouse to cooperate here. I don't know if this is pertinent, but I am using a PC mouse on a Mac right now.
As am I.
And you know, I have it set so it's not doing the natural scroll. So I'm staying away from my touchpad, basically. Then I always have to remember to flip it back. All right, so I'm going to collapse that one down. And then we're going to do the ranged. I'm going to get rid of this extra line here, but I'm liking the organization now a little bit better. All right. And we're going to pull over ranged label 1 and 2. So I assume those are in the stack view here. Let's see them. There comes a control drag. Ranged label 1. Control drag. Ranged label 2. And I think we have all the stuff that they have on page 576. So that was completing page 576. They do have the question label on theirs up at the top and the progress one at the bottom. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy with this. You know, that's a lot of outlets to add all at once. So it says, go ahead and create them. Okay, so we already did that. And since the screen has so many controls overlapping one another, you'll probably find it easier to control drag from the outline, which we figured out already. With the outlets in place, you can update each of the controls in the update UI method. Two of the outlets, question label and question progress view, will need to be updated with every new question. The label and button outlets need to be updated only if the related stack view will be displayed. So for the question label, assign its text to the current question string, and for the progress view, calculate the percentage by dividing the question index by the total number of questions. That's the text on page 577. I'm moving on to the next page. And so they do give us the code here, right? So that's the code that we're working with. So we're going to tweak our code and update UI to match that code. And so these 3 lines will stay as they are, right? All right, the navigation title item, they have it further down, but that let question index thing, that will stay. And then they're adding a couple here, so I'm going to see if I can just copy these in. For the sake of efficiency, I'll drop these in the chat. It will come with the annotations, so fair warning. And then I'm going to paste those here. And I'm going to get rid of the junk. I wish they wouldn't do this with their stuff.
Oh, I know.
You know, I'm almost tempted to kind of like sanitize it. Honestly, like put it in a different program like VSC or Notepad++ or something and clean it up that way. Oh, okay. So it seems like it doesn't really care that this is on a separate line. And I'm tempted to do this with it. But then it puts it on the next line. Anyhow, so so I combined it into one line. I think this is better, actually, right? I get the fear that it would maybe throw an error otherwise. Now, what I think is kind of interesting is that this piece is moved to here in the example that I'm looking at. So I'm tempted to just follow that example. So not that it really makes a difference, but hey, rather that than have the code break. All right, now they're adding a couple of pieces here. Once again, I'm gonna copy those in the chat, you guys. And then I'm gonna append it here and then deal with the aftermath once again. And then looks like all of these are okay. The switch is fine. So everything is set to false. All right, so this is good. All right, so I'll leave that up on the screen for a second. So this is the updated function update UI, right? And I'm just right now what my eye is doing is I'm doing a double check to make sure all this stuff is in the right place, potentially indented correctly. Of course, I copy pasted it, but I'm still checking to make sure it's correct. And you know what? Like one thing I'm catching is like these 2 lines are on 2 separate lines. I'm uncomfortable with that, so I'm gonna like do this. And I think that's going to be more appropriate.
So I am getting error.
Okay. So one thing we did discover is that the order of this stuff here does matter, especially this piece. So like, for example, if you had this down below, this doesn't resolve correctly, right? Because you hadn't defined it yet, and it does read sequentially. All right, so I'm now moving on to page 579, and it says in the single answer stack view, each button title corresponds to an answer. Use the set title _for method to update the title. And the first button will use the first answer string, the second button will use the second answer string, and so on. And so we're basically adding a whole function for this. I'm once again going to copy paste in the chat, folks. For those of you that are in the session, that is. And then I'm just going to place that function here because I assume that's where they want it, and they're not really telling us where they want it. I'm just making the speculation because I think I've done this before. And of course, my memory is kind of fading on it by this point because it's been a while since I've done it. But I'm dropping that in here. So that's for the single stack view. We'll also have the same kind of setup here for the multiple stack view. So once again, in the chat, you guys. Getting rid of all the artifacts here. So far, so good. Now it says for the range response, we're going to need to set up the stack view a little differently because there's only 2 labels. The update, the quiz will work better if every question has 4 answers, even though only 2 answers are required. Since the number of answers isn't guaranteed, it wouldn't be safe to index directly to the collection. For example, if you use answers 3 to access the 4th element of the answers, but the collection only contained 2, the program would crash. So we're going to make a little adjustment to that here. And it says no matter how many answers you have for your range thing, in the chat, you guys, is the code. For your range response question, the first and last properties of the collection allow you to safely access the 2 answer structs that correspond to the labels. Okay, so that's this code. Once again, removing the artifacts from the copy paste. With these 3 new methods defined, update the switch statement cases in the update UI to call them. So now we're going to go back and change these. So in other words, these switch statements are going to change. And you can do this one of 2 ways. So you can just grab the lines that you need and type them in, or just grab the whole structure and replace it, which is, I think, what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to grab that code from the book. Once again, trying to save time. In the chat. And I'm going to highlight this, paste, remove artifacts, and hope for the best. It's kind of a risky way to do it, honestly. But you know what? We were just basically changing these lines. All right, we are now at a build and run point, and judging from how much we have left here, I think this might be our last build and run, folks. So here's the brave pressing of the switch. All right, still have to fix that rabbit, but we should be able to go to the first screen. And hey, check it out. Which food do you like the most? But all my buttons are jumbled. And it says here we should be able to see them. I really can't click on any of them, right? Let's read what it says, though. It says the labels and buttons should all update to reflect the first question. Great work. If you see the controls aren't updating, use the connections inspector to verify that you've created each IB outlet property. Hover over every item, check to see if their outlets, kind of sync up. I obviously have a little bit of a layout issue here. Here's our unfortunate reality, though. we are at the end of class time. And so I'm gonna end the recording here. So I don't know if I'll come back and maybe record a closing to this video. Maybe I will. It probably would be, the right thing to do to just show the solution on it. But we've run out of time for both the semester and the class today. So the recording ends here. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, even though this was not a gloriously awesome video, but hey, maybe you enjoyed it anyhow.